Hello everyone. It's a slightly strange format looking at myself presenting this, but I hope I do the content justice. It's a real pleasure to be here speaking to you all. As Mary mentioned, my name's Hannah Mahoney. I'm a program manager for a system change program called Golden Key. The National Lottery Community Fund, previously the Big Lottery Fund, undertook some research maybe 15 years ago, looking at the experience of clients who face multiple disadvantage. So we're talking about the clients who we all know, who revolve around the system, who often end up in hostels when they maybe shouldn't be, and hostels end up having to, manage a lot of very complex needs, which they're not really set up for. And often because of behaviours or issues that the clients experience, or because of their multiple disadvantage, they can't sustain in hostels and they end up revolving around the system, and we find it very difficult to find placements for them. So following this research, the National Lottery Communities Fund decided to make a significant investment, a system change investment, to focus on improving the quality of lives for this particular group of people who I know we all know. So that was a £110 million investment, and that started around 9 years ago to fund 11 sites across the country to work with the systems, to work with the clients and understand what their experience of services were, to inform us really about what isn't working for the services, what's not working for the clients, and also what we can do as a system to try and support their work. We're in the final year of our programme now, so we're at the end of year 7, and our aim in the final year is really to focus on sharing the legacy and learning of the last 7 years of work. It really has been, my background is in service delivery, in operations, so I understand how contracts normally work on year contracts or 3-year contracts. So it's been a real privilege to be able to spend time doing this work and not having to focus all of our priorities and energy on delivery, but having some time to reflect and think about the best outcome for the client. So as a programme, we focused on 2 key areas. There's an operational side. We don't want to deliver services or undermine the system in any way, but we did want to explore the experience of the client through research. So we worked with we had a team of service coordinators who worked with around up to 300 clients across the 7 years. And as you can, I'm sure you know, that's not a lot of people. But our intention wasn't to create solutions for all these people, but to follow their journey. So that worked alongside a local evaluation that was delivered by the University of West of England, and a national evaluation to understand the needs of the clients and to log their experiences. And, as many of you, I'm sure, will know, if you're able to invest a lot of money and a lot of resource into small caseloads, then you get different outcomes for clients. So we also wanted to log those outcomes and try and understand how we can replicate that in systems which have faced a lot of challenges, a lot of cuts, and environmental issues like COVID over the last 10 years or so. So that's the learning we want to focus on in the final year. We've also, in the operational arm of our work, we've been testing some innovation pilots. One of them I'm sure you're all familiar with is Housing First. We know there's a lot of research globally about Housing First being effective for particularly, I think, adults, maybe 25 and up, who sit in this complex needs arena. But we wanted to see if that would work in Bristol, and if it did, if there was any way that we could sustain it in Bristol, bearing in mind that Housing First costs a lot more and delivers to much fewer people than maybe hostels or other solutions. So we have tested it in Bristol, and again, unsurprisingly, probably, if you give people accommodation and make that the only priority, eventually it does work. And I haven't got the figures to hand. I have them somewhere else. I can share research on Housing First, but it's around an 80% success rate on the interventions for Housing First. And one of our clients was someone who's been revolving around the system, and from hostels to rough sleeping and sort of antisocial behaviour, etc., for around 30 years. And he's I think, just celebrated his 2-year anniversary of being in his own flat. So, so we want to now understand how Housing First can be rolled out in other areas, how it could be adjusted to meet the limitations that we experience in the system. And we want to find a provider who will take it forward, because that's not our job. We were here for a fixed term period of time. The other pilot that we've tested is called the Call-In. That's been focused on young people at risk of street exploitation, which is the way we like to say people at risk of being groomed into gangs. So primarily focused, and this cohort was primarily focused on young Black boys who were in an inner city area where this issue was very prevalent. And again, we had around an 80% success rate in deterring young people from what was an imminent long custody sentence and into education or employment or other development opportunities. So again, this project is slightly lower in terms of resource. It's a coordinator working with paid peers, and the peers do most of the work with the clients to try and support them in their progress. Central to that innovation project was working with the local community. So the leaders, the faith leaders and the families of the communities affected were involved in that project, along with the police, who made a commitment not to charge or sentence these young people until they'd had a chance with the programme. Again, there's some really positive learning coming out of that project, and we'd like to see that rolled out where it could be seen valuable in other areas. Again, I can't emphasize enough how important it's been to engage with the community on that one. So we're also trying to test at the moment what other areas or other issues or other groups we could address using similar models, where we work very closely with the community and other providers, to build relationships between the community and a community who's lost trust with services. Maybe the police, you can imagine why some communities might lose trust with the police, but I think there are communities that lose trust with all services for a range of reasons, particularly marginalised groups. And we're really keen to see if this model of working with the community and other services to build bridges can help protect some of these groups of people who are being marginalised into multiple disadvantage and spinning around the system. So that's the operational arm of our work, which, as I've said, is really focused on informing our direction of travel, helping us understand the challenges in the system. And when we've had the opportunity to do so, and there's been a bit of momentum, trying some things out. System change is a bit of a long-term process. It's quite challenging. There's a lot of individual development that we need to do to be able to make that change. And so it was really important for the programme to build in some opportunities to celebrate success and run some projects where we felt we could be successful. So these two areas as well were just opportunities to maintain momentum. 7 years is a long time to maintain the commitment of a partnership and focus on a single area, particularly at times because what we were talking about couldn't be directly related to the experience of their clients. So projects like that have been really important to maintain momentum. And I'm really pleased to say that we actually have had very consistent involvement from parties since the beginning of the programme. We have sort of suffered from people moving on, changing jobs, but we've despite that managed to maintain a very strong partnership who are going to be very involved in the final year of the programme and rolling out the legacy. So the last bit of the work that I want to talk to you about is the other half of the programme, really, and that's the system change element. So what are we doing with all this information we're getting? How do we sit around the table to build hope that we can do something different? There's not any one person in the areas that we're working with, because we're currently working outside of Bristol. We're working with North Devon and Exeter and South Gloss to do the same work, really. And there's no one around these tables who don't want to enact system change. We know we need to do something different because we all know about these clients that are in our system, but how do we do that? And we developed a diagram, which I'm going to show you now, that was really the beginning of that journey. So this is a bit of a test to see how the screen share goes. Bear with me. Because I can't see anyone, I'm probably going to need someone to put a little note in the comments to say if they can see this. Right, it's up. Can you see that? Okay. I'm going to carry on. I haven't seen a note and I can't hear anything, so I'm going to carry on as if you can see it. So I realise that you probably won't be able to see the detail in this diagram. That's okay. We're going to zoom in on certain areas. So when, as a partnership, we started talking about how we make system change happen, we run into the same, the usual challenges. How do we find the money for this? How do we create the resource? Ultimately, we're working in systems that have been defunded for years. Everyone's tired and everyone's doing as much as they can. How can we find time to do this? And in order to help us conceptualize it, we developed this diagram. This is a tool. It's not we don't think that it's necessarily a template that you can plonk anywhere else, but the focus areas of it, I believe, from working with a range of partnerships, is absolutely a useful tool. But I'll be interested in your thoughts on that. On the left-hand side, that's a series of questions, what we should be asking ourselves when we enter the system change arena, when we want to start working as a system, or when as leaders we want to work in a complexity-friendly way. There's a range of questions we can be asking ourselves. Some of the key ones are things like, where does the power lie when creating change? And that really is talking about, where's the leverage in the system, where's the energy, but also what power do I hold? Not only because I can utilize, maybe there's power that I'm not really making best use of, that I could be utilizing, but also maybe there's power that I have and I'm unwittingly blocking things by the way that I work, or the systems that I rely on to make decisions or to deliver. Maybe those things need shifting slightly to allow the power to flow better through the system. The other question, which I feel is really important for all partnerships, is what is the state that I need to be in as an individual? So in a complex arena, if we want to deliver complexity-friendly leadership in order to change the system, it's really important that we start with ourselves. And we know this is the case with our staff, because many areas are building in reflective practice. We need people to take a step back and have a breather. And the same's the case for people in leadership positions. We all need the space to do that. And these system change partnerships are actually designed to create the space for that. I'd say, from working with a range of partnerships with this diagram now, I think any group that are doing this work could maybe set their own questions. I think some of them are probably applicable and they might be helpful, but you might have different priorities, you might have different issues that you want to focus on. But I think starting with what are the questions we need to ask is a really good place to start, because it takes us out of a place of, well, where do we go from here, and moves us into a bit of a place of hope. This section in the middle is really, there's layers behind this about how you deliver system change programs. There's project plans, there's a range of tools that we have, and there's loads of tools out in the ether. But this is just a visual representation of it. So we need to focus on growing and developing trusting relationships with our partners if we want to change the system and we want to work in a systemic way. And that means not just being around the table, but it means if you were around a table with me, you could question something that I'd said, or you could ask why I was bringing that to the table at that point, and for me to respond positively to that. In a system that is utterly pressured, it's really easy to feel challenged by reflective questioning, when actually we need to be able to do that to evolve, to learn together, to develop, and to better understand each other. So that's what we mean really by growing trusting relationships. It's also really important to include co-production. I don't think I need to go into that too much. We know there's just so much, there's a huge body of evidence that indicates if you include people with lived experience, we tend to remember about the client better. It's a learning curve, an iterative process. So if we start by including someone with lived experience in our interview processes, then the next step might be we could include them in certain meetings, and then we get to a point where we feel we can include them on boards at different levels. They're guiding the service delivery, but it's an iterative process. In terms of the central point, so if with other partnerships, for instance, we've got series of partnership meetings, say once a month, and then every third month we have a reflective space. So this is a session that's focused on moving away from the action plan, we're taking some time to just reflect on what we're doing. We're making sure we can see the wood from the trees. Many partnerships like to build in a bit of system change theory into those. So we spend 10 minutes maybe talking through some system theory, and then we move on. It means you can build momentum, but you're building in the space for reflection. And that's all that means. It doesn't need to be a big burden, but it does need to be there, or we're really unlikely to build trusting relationships or move towards a healthy system if we aren't building in those reflective spaces. I want to wrap up quickly now for questions, but the final slide is what a healthy system would look like. Again, so this was done a few years ago now. It's what we thought at the time. Our thinking's evolved since then, but at the beginning of the process, if we say to ourselves, what do we think the system should like if things were different, it really helps you set your plan and your intentions, and as a group you understand from each other what you want to get from the process, which is surprisingly something that we tend to miss. I think we tend to want to move into action planning quickly, and we miss, why are we here and what's our intent in a lot of cases. So doing this exercise keeps this in mind. You can develop it and evolve it, and hopefully some of these areas you can test. You can use it as a mechanism for logging your progress. So being able to log the range of spaces you have for reflection is a good one, or evidencing that you've improved the avenues through which clients or staff can feed into strategic processes, would be a way to evidence learning from the system. Or even logging the mistakes we make. We need to value mistakes in the system and celebrate when people talk about them, because that moves us away from a blame culture, which is a behaviour which really undermines the system change process. So I'm going to stop there. There's lots more information that's available. I'm very happy to speak to people outside of this conference, but I think we're going to stop the screen share and take some questions now.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Hannah, just to let you know, we didn't see the slides on the screen, but Anna shared them during your presentation. So all the delegates will have had a copy of your screens. But I have to congratulate you. You spoke really well to them, considering that we couldn't see them. We couldn't envisage them and imagine them. I'm certain questions will start to come in. But can I just ask a question to start? You describe a process which is very intensive in terms of developing partnerships and trusting partnerships, as you called them. How do you keep those fresh, and how do you stop them from becoming complacent? Because that is the challenge. We're all on the same page, so we're all fine. Thank you very much.
I'm really glad you asked that, actually, because I should have mentioned that during the presentation. I'd say I'm kind of making this up on the spot, but off the top of my head, there's two key areas. One is having an independent chair who's experienced, who understands their role. And I think there's an art form to chairing that we might underestimate in many instances. And we tend to have, my experience of chairing in the past is people stepping up because they want to help, but don't really have the time or capacity or the training and skills to chair in a way that keeps everything together. So having a really experienced chair whose job it is to keep momentum going, keep people working well together, is invaluable. And actually they're quite cheap because they're part-time. The second is alongside a long-term sort of system change intention, as I mentioned before, building in small projects, more achievable ambitions, which allow us to celebrate success, learn together, do some work together, and perhaps working with different people that we don't normally work with can go a long way to maintaining momentum.
Thank you. A question has just come in from Anonymous. How far up the system are you seeking to change, Hannah? Are you seeking to change the law, for example?
It's interesting that you asked that again. I am currently working on Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion project strategy, because we feel that multiple disadvantage really, and the fact that the National Lottery had to invest 110 million boils down to a group of people whose human rights aren't being met and whose needs aren't being dealt with under the Equalities Act. So we're currently in discussions with some national organisations to see if we can influence. What I've been told is there's not a lot of commitment from our government to make changes to the Equalities Act at the moment, but that we can influence some of the guidelines. So at every level, wherever there's an opportunity, I think the key thing is don't bang on closed doors, focus on where the energy is, even if it's starting on frontline staff or just wherever there's energy, work on that, and then other opportunities emerge as a result of that.
That's interesting, because yes, but there's always the temptation to knock on that closed door, because that's the door you want to open. Right, the next question. How has approaching 7 years of learning impacted how you will approach delivery in the future? What has 7 years of this project meant for Hannah and the way you work?
I think, so I've got a year left on my role, so this has been on my mind actually. I think if I were to move into service delivery in the future, my main focus will be on being a flexible leader or manager. And that means adapting my, I think in the past I used to think that I had a certain style of management and leadership. I knew my strengths and weaknesses, and I kind of worked that out with my team. And now I realise that to lead in a complexity-friendly way, I need to adapt how I'm doing things to the environment. I need to be responsive. And that working in a systemic way is essential to sustainability in the future. I don't think, it's my personal belief that organisations will be able to survive in the future without having a focus on the system as well as their organisation.
Thank you. The questions are coming in now. What has been most challenging, and how did you surmount this challenge?
Well, okay, this is a personal gripe, really. One of our projects that was directed to us by our group of people with lived experience, Independent Futures, who I'd highly recommend if anyone wants to work with people with lived experience. They're fantastic. I can share details. They tasked us with addressing the issue of clients being assessed over and over again. And we wanted to change the system to change that experience, really. There were two ways we could do this. We could spend millions of pounds trying to formulate some kind of high-tech technical response, retina scanners and fingerprinting and things like that, which we obviously couldn't do, so that the clients could hold their own information and share it when they wanted. Or we could make a decision as a system to slightly change the way that we work, stop asking everyone the same questions over and over again, and maybe just trust the information that we've received from a partner, and have a cup of tea with a client and build up our knowledge about them from that and from there. And if you need specific information, I know some organisations have a legal obligation for certain information. We build up that picture, but we don't ask all the same questions again. And it took. So this isn't to moan about the services that we worked with at all, because they worked really well with us, but the system put a lot of pressure on people, and it's really hard to focus on big projects like this outside of that. But we worked with the housing services, and we created a trusted assessment process where one assessment was enough, and then from there on you take a psychologically informed approach to assessments, and you would have a cup of tea or do whatever the client wanted to do in that session and build up your rapport from there. Focus on the relationship rather than the information. And I do think the services did everything they could to make that happen, and it has happened. But from my team's perspective, it was such a challenging thing to do, and they got so much sort of anger and frustration from people because it was such a difficult task that I had to keep revolving my staff off the project, new people, fresh blood in, just to try and see it through completion, which we did, but it was really tough.
Yes, and that's an aspect one wouldn't think about always. There's a lot of interest in partnership working coming through from the questions. People asking how you keep people engaged over such a long period of time. Partners whose possibly their focus is not on homelessness but other areas. How do you keep them on board?
Well, I would flip it round. Actually, most of the system, the academic. So we've done some academic systems learning. We've done some practice-based systems change learning, and oh, is there a delay?
You're okay.
I'm not going to speak because I think there might be a delay.
Okay, Hannah.
Okay. Most of the learning tells you if there's people who. Okay. It's
not as bad as you think. Plough ahead.
So the bottom line is go where the energy is. So if there's people around the table who want to work with you, if they're not housing services, work with them. If there's people who fade out and don't want to be included, they don't feel like that's a priority, they're going to be really hard to bring back. And you want to focus your energy on people who want to be there and who've got energy to make change. Across the course of the programme, there has been some ebb and flow of partners, but we've had a really strong core membership. And ultimately, you do have to work really, psychologically, we've had to work really hard to understand why people are around that table and meet what they want. So we're not going into it assuming that they want to hear what we've got to say. We're going into it saying the things that we think that will help them stay around the table. So, and that's, we've got a lot of learning products that we can share to help other partnerships do similar things. I'm currently working with a range of partnerships to build that sort of knowledge and understanding around how to maintain momentum and keep the right people around the table. The main thing is focus where their energy is and build up your group of champions and let them do some of the work as well.
Hannah, thank you very, very, very much for that energetic presentation. That's really interesting, exciting. What are your intentions in terms of publishing the results of this final year and looking back, looking forward? What's the intention in terms of report generation, dissemination?
So the national evaluation, the local evaluation reports and our learning team reports will all be available on our website, and we are going to continue to pay for hosting, I think, for 2 years beyond the course of Golden Key.
Brilliant. Can we wish you well in this final year?
I didn't hear that. I think I'm okay.
Can we wish you well in this final year and really looking forward to seeing the results of your reflections. Thank you very, very much. Diolch, Hannah.